What if the first human footprints in Martian dust were not the beginning of a journey home, but the final marks of a one-way crossing? What if the people who become the first citizens of Mars never again feel rain, never breathe Earth's air without a seal between them, never stand beneath a blue sky that belongs to the species that made them? That possibility is not a dramatic exaggeration. It is one of the most serious truths hidden inside the dream of going to Mars. And if questions like this pull you deeper into the unknown, subscribe to Beyond the Universe, because this is where space stops being a destination and starts becoming a test of what intelligence is willing to become. When most people imagine a Mars mission, they picture a heroic return, a flag planted in alien soil, a few months of science, a triumphant launch back into the darkness, and then applause on Earth. But the deeper you look, the more that story begins to fracture. The first humans on Mars may not come back because Mars is not merely far away. It is far away in a way that changes the meaning of distance itself. It is not the kind of far that can be solved by a better map. It is the kind of far that turns every decision into a gravity well. Earth and Mars are not fixed in a neat celestial arrangement like neighboring houses on a street. They move on different tracks around the sun, forever shifting apart and drawing nearer in cycles that only briefly favor travel. The window to launch is narrow, usually opening once every 26 months. Miss it, and the planet does not wait politely. The gap widens, the fuel requirements change, the rescue options vanish into mathematics. Even before the first boot touches red soil, Mars is already asking a question most worlds never need to ask. If you go now, can you still come back later without rewriting everything that got you there? And then comes the communication delay. Imagine speaking to Earth and hearing your own words return to you with a delay that can stretch from several minutes to over 20 minutes one way, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. No live conversation, no instant emergency response, no human hand reaching through a screen to fix what goes wrong. A mistake at Mars is not a problem you call home to solve. It is a problem that must be solved by whoever is still alive enough to solve it. That alone changes the psychology of the entire mission. You are no longer traveling with backup. You are traveling with absence. But here's where it gets stranger. The distance is not only measured in kilometers, it is measured in what can fail without help. A spacecraft leaving Earth is a tightly choreographed machine of escape velocity, life support, shielding, docking systems, fuel reserves, and timing. Every one of those systems has to work not for a few hours, but for months, then years, then under the stresses of another world. A return vehicle on Mars is not just a ship. It is a promise that a tiny industrial civilization can be built on a planet that never asked for one. That is where the fantasy begins to thin. A return trip from Mars is not simply a matter of turning the ship around. It is a logistics chain woven across deep space. You need a launch vehicle capable of lifting off Mars, which has about a third of Earth's gravity, but still demands a vehicle that can survive and perform after long exposure to radiation, dust, and cold. You need fuel. Not just any fuel, but propellant that can be manufactured, stored, handled, and used reliably on a planet where everything is hostile to easy industry. You need oxygen, water, power, spare parts, thermal systems, landing precision, ascent capability, navigation, and contingency plans for every single point where the entire architecture can collapse. And every one of those pieces must arrive or be produced before the crew ever thinks about leaving. If one valve jams, if one pump fails, if one dust storm reduces solar output, if one reactor goes offline, if one seal cracks after months of abrasion, the return ship can become a monument instead of a vehicle. A monument to intention. A monument to how close civilization came to triumph and how easily it can be trapped by a planet that does not care whether it is admired. The cruel brilliance of Mars is that it is not the most impossible place in the solar system. It is just impossible enough to seduce us. It has day-night cycles that resemble Earth's. It has a thin atmosphere. It has water ice. It has terrain we can map, sunlight we can harvest, and seasons we can measure. It feels almost negotiable. That is what makes it dangerous. The planet seems to whisper, "Come closer. You can live here." But each invitation hides a sentence in the fine print, not like before. If you were standing on the surface of Mars, the sky would not be blue. It would be butterscotch, washed with dust and distance. The sun would look smaller, less generous. The air, if it could be called that, would be so thin that you would die in moments without pressure support. The temperature would swing like a blade between relative calm and lethal cold. Radiation would seep through the landscape because Mars lost what Earth kept, a robust magnetic shield and a thick, forgiving atmosphere. There is no breathable wind. There is only the silence of a place that has forgotten how to protect life Imagine waking up there, not as an astronaut on a scheduled shift, as a settler, as someone who knows the next sunrise will not bring a rescue team from across town, but an entire civilization separated from you by millions of kilometers and a launch window that may not come for years. You begin to understand that Mars is not simply another environment. It is an environment that forces a new definition of dependence. On Earth, we are surrounded by systems we rarely notice. On Mars, every breath is a machine's gift. And then comes the deeper problem. Even if the technology to go exists, even if the return ship is built, even if the fuel is waiting, the human body itself becomes part of the equation in ways that are hard to reverse. Months in microgravity during the journey there and back can weaken bones, atrophy muscles, reshape fluid dynamics, alter vision, and complicate immune function. By the time the crew arrives, they may already be changed. Mars does not merely receive travelers, it remakes them. On the surface, reduced gravity offers a strange kind of relief after the punishing void of transit, but it is not the same as comfort. Lower gravity may help with movement, but the human body evolved under Earth's pull. Our skeletons, circulatory systems, vestibular balance, and muscular endurance were sculpted by this planet's particular insistence. Take that away, and the body starts to negotiate with physics in unfamiliar ways. Add Martian dust, radiation exposure, altered circadian cues, isolation, and constrained living quarters, and the mission ceases to be a trip. It becomes a long-term biological experiment conducted on the edge of the species' tolerance. This is where the return dream starts to become less like a plan and more like a narrative we tell ourselves to keep the fear at a manageable distance. We'll go, do the work, and come home. It sounds natural because it echoes every expedition myth we know. But Mars does not behave like a mountain climbed by a team or an ocean crossed by a ship. Those voyages were perilous, yes, but they unfolded within a biosphere where rescue, recovery, and supply still existed somewhere over the horizon. Mars is different. Mars is a horizon without a hinterland. The crew cannot count on a spontaneous rescue if the return system fails. There is no neighboring nation of Mars, no port to drift into, no village with tools, food, and shelter. The logic of survival becomes brutally local. Every gram of mass transported from Earth is expensive. Every spare part is a decision about what kind of failure you are willing to accept. And every delay in resupply is not a scheduling inconvenience, but a narrowing corridor between life and the kind of death that comes not in a sudden blaze, but in a system slowly exhausting itself. That is why any serious Mars settlement strategy begins to resemble something more radical than exploration. It begins to resemble the construction of a second origin. If you want people on Mars to leave and return, you must create an entire transportation, manufacturing, and life support infrastructure on a world that has none of it. If you want them to survive, you must first solve agriculture under artificial light or filtered sunlight, radiation shielding, water extraction, oxygen production, waste recycling, habitat maintenance, medical care, and psychological resilience. By the time you have solved all of that, the mission is no longer a temporary visit. It is a civilization seed. But here's where it gets stranger. Once you begin building a home on Mars, the logic of returning starts to erode under its own success. The more infrastructure you establish, the less the mission looks like an excursion, and the more it resembles a branch in human history. At some point, the people there are not just guests. They become residents. Then they become citizens. Then they become something Earth can no longer fully describe from a distance. The return trip, once treated as an expectation, turns into an optional nostalgia. Yet for the first cruise, that transformation will not feel philosophical. It will feel intensely physical. They will wake up to alarms, maintenance cycles, oxygen checks, habitat inspections, food inventories, dust infiltration, temperature failures, radiation alerts, and the knowledge that everything around them is kept alive by a web of narrow margins. On Earth, the background systems of civilization are almost invisible. Water comes out of a tap. Air is everywhere. Fields grow. Emergency services exist. On Mars, background systems become foreground reality. You do not live in a world. You live inside a machine that is pretending to be a world. And machines, unlike worlds, require constant negotiation. They require the attention of people who cannot afford boredom. A loose cable can become an emergency. A contamination event can become a medical crisis. A habitat leak can become a death sentence. Even sleep becomes a discipline, because the body has to be coaxed into cycles that the planet does not naturally support. The Martian day is close enough to Earth's to be psychologically helpful, but close enough is not the same as kind. Everything there is almost familiar, which may be the most unsettling condition of all. the psychological strain begins quietly. At first, the crew is busy. Training, setup, protocols, checklists, tasks, drills. There is a purpose to every waking hour, but eventually the novelty wears off, and the horizon remains empty. There is no weather with human meaning, no streets, no trees, no casual human noise drifting through walls. The environment outside is almost entirely unavailable to the senses. You cannot breathe it, you cannot touch it without consequence. You can only observe it through layers of glass, metal, and procedure. The planet becomes a spectacle you survive rather than a place you inhabit. Isolation on Mars is not just social isolation, it is ontological isolation. On Earth, even in remote places, you know that life exists elsewhere in abundance. Somewhere someone is laughing, eating, arguing, falling in love, grieving, repairing a roof, walking a dog, opening a grocery store, missing a train. On Mars, the knowledge that humanity exists at all becomes abstract. The distance is too vast for casual reassurance. You are not simply far from home. You are in a place where home itself has turned into a story, and stories have power. The first humans on Mars will be carrying not only equipment but meaning. They will know they are representatives of a species that learned to cross oceans, split atoms, decode genomes, and build telescopes that can peer into the early universe. That can feel uplifting. It can also feel like pressure with a heartbeat. Every failure will be observed through the lens of civilization. Every success will be mythologized. They will not only be astronauts, they will be symbols, and symbols are heavy things to carry when gravity already wants to flatten you. But the real pressure may come from something less visible. Purpose can become a source of endurance, but it can also become a trap. If the mission is framed as a grand beginning, then returning becomes a kind of defeat. If the mission is framed as the first step toward permanence, then the first crew may already understand, perhaps privately, that their return is not central to the story. The public may imagine a voyage out and back. The planners may discuss contingencies and schedules, but the people who go may slowly realize that they are not passengers in a round trip. They are pioneers in a transition. This is why the phrase, "never come back," can sound tragic while also being strangely inadequate. It suggests abandonment, as though the first Martians are being sacrificed to ambition. But from another angle, the phrase is not about loss. It is about function. Some journeys are designed not to end where they begin, but to create conditions that make the original path obsolete. Early ocean voyages did not merely visit distant shores. They redrew the map of human possibility. The first permanent settlers in new lands did not come back because coming back was no longer the point. Mars may represent that same irreversible shift, but on a planetary scale, and with far less mercy. Still, there is nothing simple or noble about the danger. Mars is not waiting to reward courage. It is waiting to expose fragility. Radiation is one of the most brutal hazards because it is invisible and cumulative. Unlike a storm you can watch approach, radiation does not announce itself with drama. It slips through cells, alters DNA, increases long-term cancer risk, and chips away at the body's trust in the environment. Dust is another enemy, fine and abrasive, persistent in a way that feels almost intentional. It can damage equipment, clog joints, contaminate systems, and carry chemical risks we cannot afford to dismiss. The planet is not dead in a passive sense. It is actively incompatible with casual life. Any attempt to bring humans back from Mars must therefore solve not only ascent from the surface, but the entire chain of return. Orbital rendezvous, refueling, ascent energy, life support for the transit home, and the reliability needed to trust all of that after living for months under isolation. If Mars surface operations are delayed by weather, dust, failure, injury, or a political decision back on Earth, the return window can close. Then the crew waits. Waiting on Mars is not like waiting in an airport. It is waiting with a planet under your boots and eternity in your schedule. But here's where the story grows darker and more interesting. For decades, we have imagined space exploration as an expansion of convenience. Better engines, better habitats, better systems, and the human story simply continues. Yet Mars forces another possibility. That expansion may require a permanent break from the assumptions that shaped civilization on Earth. We have always lived within a planet that recycles our waste, bathes us in atmospheric protection, and feeds us through ecosystems older than human memory. Mars offers none of that. To survive there, we must carry civilization not as culture alone, but as a closed-loop metabolism. A closed-loop civilization is not just technologically difficult, it is philosophically consequential. It means that every loss matters more because replacement is expensive. Every inefficiency becomes moral weight. Every habit of waste that Earth's abundance hides must be abandoned or redesigned. In that sense, Mars might become the first place where humanity cannot afford to be careless. That is not a romantic thought. It is a civilization-level discipline. A species that has treated its own planet as inexhaustible may discover on Mars what scarcity really means. And scarcity changes people. It changes governance, status, labor, family structures, education, ritual, and what counts as freedom. On Earth, if a community fails, others remain. On Mars, a community that fails may take with it everyone who depends on it. That creates a moral environment unlike anything in our history. The stakes become intimate. One person's error can become everyone's crisis. One person's insight can keep dozens alive. In such a place, the difference between competence and collapse becomes almost sacred. Imagine children growing up under a dome or in buried habitats, knowing the outside world is a red, unforgiving expanse that kills without apology. They would not inherit Earth's open-air childhood. They would inherit a constructed intimacy with survival. Their drawings might include shields, airlocks, hydroponic gardens, pressure corridors, and stars seen through reinforced panels. For them, home would not be defined by natural abundance. It would be defined by maintenance. That is a profound civilizational mutation. And perhaps it is the first honest one humanity has ever attempted. Because Earth has always hidden the cost of being alive. Oxygen feels free only because an entire biosphere has been donating it for eons. Water feels ordinary only because cycles we scarcely notice are doing the work. Food feels simple only because the planet has been patient. Mars removes the illusion. It tells us that life is not a given. It is a negotiation. Every breath is earned. Every meal is engineered. Every day is a truce with entropy. Then the deeper problem arrives, the one that sits beneath all the engineering. Even if the first crew could return, should they? If you spend years building a habitat, refining systems, learning the rhythm of a hostile world, and growing dependent on the fragile society you have established there, then leaving becomes its own form of violence. It means abandoning the very infrastructure that your survival helped create. It means interrupting a chain of continuity that may be too expensive to pause. At some point, the return journey does not merely become difficult, it becomes irrational. This is the inversion hidden inside the dream. We imagine that Mars is a place we visit and then leave behind. But the more successful we are, the less that vision makes sense. Success on Mars means permanence. Permanence means children. Children mean institutions. Institutions mean memory. Memory means history. And once history begins on another world, returning is no longer about going back to a starting point. It is about choosing whether the species remains biologically and culturally tethered to a single planet or becomes something larger than one cradle. That realization can feel like a loss because Earth is not just our home. It is our origin myth made physical. It is the only world where our species evolved, where our languages formed, where our art learned to interpret skies, storms, oceans, and seasons. To leave permanently feels almost like betrayal, but that feeling may be the emotional residue of a much older truth. Every living thing eventually outgrows the conditions that first made it possible, not through contempt, through necessity. And necessity is the quiet engine of civilization. We do not move into dangerous frontiers because we dislike the old world. We move because the old world cannot answer every future question. A single planet species remains at the mercy of one biosphere, one climate, one impact event, one supervolcano, one engineered catastrophe, one chain of failures too large to reverse. We do not need an apocalypse to understand this. We only need enough time. Mars is not a luxury. It is a hedge against cosmic fragility. Still, that practical argument does not erase the emotional truth. If the first humans on Mars do not return, someone on Earth will cry, and rightly so. Their absence will be personal, not abstract. Families will live with the ache of distance no ceremony can fully heal. There will be birthdays missed, funerals attended through screens, conversations delayed, ordinary moments forever split into before and after. The cost of becoming interplanetary is not paid only in rockets. It is paid in human continuity. But here's where the story opens wider. The pain of distance is not the final verdict. It may be the price of extending the reach of consciousness beyond one world. We are a species that has repeatedly transformed loss into structure. We built cities because wandering was too exposed. We built libraries because memory was too fragile. We built telescopes because eyesight was too narrow. We build institutions because individual lives are brief. Mars may simply be the next and most severe expression of that same instinct. We turn vulnerability into infrastructure. Imagine standing on the edge of a Martian canyon at sunrise, your suit softly hissing, your visor reflecting a landscape no ancestor ever saw. The ground below is ancient, carved by forces that once moved water across a planet now mostly dry. In that moment, the planet is not only hostile, it is historical. It tells a story about loss at the scale of worlds. Mars may be a dead planet, but death here is not empty. It is evidence that planets change, climates collapse, atmospheres thin, magnetic shields fade, and habitability can vanish even on a world that once may have been gentler. Mars is a warning written in stone. That warning matters because Earth is not immune to change. Our planet is not fragile in the same way as Mars, but it is not invincible. Civilization has often behaved as though its arrangement of comfort were permanent. Mars strips that illusion away by showing what a world can become when protective conditions are lost. It is a distant mirror held up to our own future. If we are wise, we will not look at Mars and say only, "How do we get there?" We will also ask, "What does Mars say about staying here?" The answer is uncomfortable. It says that life is contingent. It says that stability is an achievement, not a promise. It says that the same intelligence that builds satellites and reactors and telescopes must also learn restraint, stewardship, and long-term thinking if it wants any of those accomplishments to matter. In that sense, Mars is not an escape from Earth's problems. It is a magnifying glass pointed at them. The challenge is not merely whether humans can survive there. The challenge is whether we can become the kind of species capable of surviving ourselves. And then the philosophical inversion completes itself. The first humans to Mars may never come back because they are not meant to be tourists in the old sense. They are the threshold. They are the first line of a civilization that understands it cannot rely on one world forever. Their one-way arrival is not a failure of return. It is proof that the species has begun to separate its destiny from a single planetary cradle. The tragedy is not that they cannot come back. The deeper truth is that coming back would mean Mars never truly changed us. Once you see it this way, the mission becomes larger than conquest, larger than science, larger than national prestige. It becomes an act of civilizational self-redefinition. On Mars, humanity would be forced to confront a terrifying and beautiful possibility, that intelligence does not peak when it masters a planet, but when it learns to carry life across worlds without losing its moral center. That is a harder achievement than building a rocket. It requires the transformation of culture, ethics, economics, education, and our relationship to scarcity itself. The first Mars settlers may therefore be less like explorers of the past and more like founders of a branch species, not in the sense of becoming something other than human, but in the sense that human life will begin to diverge under different pressures, different gravity, different skies, different rhythms of work and dependence. Language may shift, customs may shift, political structures may shift. Even the concept of home may become plural. Earth may remain origin, Mars may become inheritance, and that is where awe enters. Not the simple awe of distance or red landscapes or a rocket rising into the dark. The deeper awe is that life, through us, has become capable of relocating itself beyond the cradle that produced it. The universe does not owe intelligence a future, yet intelligence appears determined to build one. That determination may be the most astonishing feature of human existence. Not that we look up, but that when we do, we eventually start planning a way to live among what once seemed unreachable. If that sounds almost unbearably vast, it is because it is. The first human beings on Mars may never return to Earth in the literal sense, but their voyage could mark the beginning of something far more consequential than a trip home. It could mark the moment civilization learns to outgrow the loneliness of a single planet, not by abandoning Earth, but by carrying its hard-won light into another sky. And perhaps that is the true destiny hidden inside the red dust. Not a one-way exile, but the first step in turning a fragile species into a multi-world civilization, one that finally understands that survival is not just about enduring the universe, but becoming expansive enough to meet it. In the end, Mars does not ask whether we are brave. It asks whether we are ready to accept that some beginnings cannot be reversed, that some departures are really births, that some losses are the price of becoming larger than our origin. And if the first humans there never come back, it may not mean humanity has failed. It may mean humanity has finally reached the point where home is no longer a place, but a responsibility we carry wherever consciousness can survive. And once that realization settles in, the entire silhouette of the mission changes. Mars stops looking like a destination at the end of a map and starts looking like a branch in the story of life itself, because a one-way journey is only tragic if you imagine the point was always to return unchanged. But what if the deeper purpose is transformation? What if the true achievement is not that humans visit Mars, but that a part of humanity becomes capable of staying there long enough for life to take root under another sky? That is when the question stops being about transport and becomes about civilization. A rocket can carry bodies. A civilization has to carry meaning. It has to bring language, law, education, memory, medicine, labor, conflict, reconciliation, ritual, and the fragile social glue that keeps people from becoming merely a collection of surviving organisms. On Mars, that burden becomes impossible to ignore. You cannot outsource culture to abundance when abundance no longer exists. Everything must be built, maintained, and justified from first principles. And that is why the first humans there may never return in any ordinary sense. Not because Earth disappears, but because the mathematics of permanence begins to win. Once a settlement becomes useful, once children are born, once local industry begins to emerge, once medical systems and agricultural systems and power systems become integrated into daily life, leaving becomes more than a homecoming or a mission success. It becomes a rupture. The settlement is no longer a project. It is a place where lives have taken shape. Imagine the first generation born on Mars. They will not experience Earth as a homeland in the emotional way their parents did. Earth will be legend, archive, ancestry, the original blue world. They may visit one day, if physiology, politics, and economics allow it, but they will return to Mars differently from the way their parents left it, because they will carry the gravity of another world in their bones, in their habits, in the dimensions of their lives. For them, Mars is not exile, it is origin number 2. This is one of the quietest revolutions in human history, the moment when a species stops being monolithic. Every culture on Earth has always existed under one planetary sky, one background radiation field, one biosphere. But a multi-world civilization will not be psychologically, biologically, or politically identical across its worlds. Different environments create different expectations, different tolerances, different values. The distance between Earth and Mars is not just millions of kilometers. It is the distance between two human futures that will slowly, inevitably, stop feeling the same. That possibility can be exhilarating. It can also be unsettling in a way that reaches beyond science fiction, because once humanity spreads across worlds, no single disaster can erase it as easily. The species becomes harder to extinguish. That is the optimistic interpretation. But there is another, more complex one. As we distribute ourselves across space, we may also distribute ourselves across divergence. Separate habitats, separate challenges, separate cultures, separate meanings of what it means to be fully human. The dream of survival may come with the price of fragmentation, and yet fragmentation has always been part of our story. We are a species of departures. Every time our ancestors crossed a river, crossed a desert, crossed an ocean, they created new worlds of memory and adaptation. The scale changes, but the pattern remains. Mars is different only because the threshold is so severe that the old illusions cannot survive the crossing. There will be no romantic wandering across red plains without systems, no casual frontier independence, no myth of easy resilience. Mars forces honesty. It strips away the idea that humanity can live anywhere without first becoming disciplined. Discipline is not glamorous, but it is the hidden architecture of survival. On Mars, every structure will depend on routines that feel monotonous until one of them fails. Air filters must be maintained, water must be reclaimed, greenhouse systems must be inspected, radiation shielding must be monitored, power generation must be diversified, medical contingencies must be rehearsed. The settlement will live or die not on spectacle, but on repetition. Civilization there will resemble a liturgy of maintenance, a daily devotion to continuity. That may sound less like conquest than caution, but it is precisely why the mission matters. The oldest human achievements were not made by those who leapt the highest, but by those who learned how to preserve fire, food, knowledge, and cooperation across time. Mars will demand that same intelligence at a scale our ancestors could barely imagine. It will ask whether we can extend not just our reach, but our patience, not just our ambition, but our stewardship. And still, beneath all of that, the human heart will remain what it has always been, vulnerable to longing. The first Mars settlers will miss oceans they have never seen from orbit in person, weather they can no longer stand inside, forests they can only remember through archives and stories. Even if they choose not to return, they will live with the ache of the Earth they left behind. That ache may become a kind of gravity in itself, not physical but emotional, invisible, persistent, impossible to fully escape. That emotional gravity will shape the culture of Mars. Songs will be written about blue skies. Festivals may mark launch windows as sacred dates. Children may learn Earth history not as distant geography, but as inheritance. The idea of return will likely persist as a myth even after it becomes impractical, because human beings do not abandon symbolic homecomings easily. We keep the dream alive long after the logistics have gone missing. Sometimes that dream is what keeps us going. Sometimes it is what keeps us from admitting that the future has already moved on. But what if the future is not asking us to choose between Earth and Mars? What if it is asking us to understand that civilization, to remain alive over geological time, must become something with roots in more than one world? A single-planet species is a story with an ending. A multi-planet species is a story with branches. The difference is not cosmetic, it is existential. One can be erased by a single catastrophe. The other can endure through redundancy, adaptation, and the slow accumulation of off-world knowledge. That is why Mars is often described as a backup plan, though even that phrase understates the ambition. A backup plan is what you make when you expect the original to continue. Mars is more like a second sentence after the first one has begun to run out of room. It is a continuation, but also a correction. A way of saying that consciousness cannot be content to remain local if it wants to survive the full scale of cosmic time. Yet none of this happens without pain. The first human beings who commit their lives to Mars may do so, understanding that they are choosing a different form of mortality. They are not choosing immortality. They are choosing relevance to a future that may unfold slowly, over centuries, in conditions their birth planet could never guarantee. Their sacrifice may not be the melodrama of dying for a cause. It may be the quieter, harder sacrifice of staying where history needs them more than home does. And there is something almost unbearably moving about that. A person standing on another planet, not because they were forced there, but because they believed the species could not remain confined to one cradle forever. Their life becomes a hinge between eras. Behind them, Earth continues with all its beauty and instability. Ahead of them, a new society may begin with dust, light, labor, and the stubborn refusal to let life end where it started. So when people ask why the first humans on Mars will never come back, the answer is not just fuel, distance, engineering, or danger. Those are the outer layers. The deeper answer is that return becomes less meaningful once the mission stops being a visit and starts becoming a beginning. The first people there may cross a threshold from which the old definition of home no longer fully applies. They will still love Earth. They may still grieve it, but they will also help create something that cannot exist unless some part of humanity stays. That is the unsettling grandeur of it. Mars may take people away from Earth forever, but it may also save the idea of humanity from being chained to one fragile world. In the long view, that is not abandonment. It is expansion, not escape, but diversification. Not the end of home, but the invention of more than one. And somewhere deep inside that transformation is the final truth this story keeps circling. We do not go to Mars just because we can. We go because intelligence, once awakened, seems unable to stop at the edge of its own birthplace. It reaches, it tests, it risks, it learns, and when it discovers that one planet is not enough, it begins the long, irreversible process of becoming a species with a future large enough to fit the universe that made it. To stand upon the Martian surface for the first time will be to confront a paradox older than humanity itself. The simultaneous thrill of arrival and the quiet sorrow of no return. The red dust sifting beneath your boots is ancient, older than the tides that shaped Earth's continents, older than the rivers that carved valleys where our earliest ancestors once wandered. On Mars, time feels frozen, not in stasis, but compressed, a reminder that worlds change, and life, no matter how tenacious, is always a brief flourish within cosmic epochs. Imagine being there, on that alien shore, looking back, not at home, but at a frail blue dot dwindling into the void. The Earth you left behind will be whisper-thin, a fragile testament to where you were shaped, a place beyond reach for now, perhaps forever. It is a ghostly tether that both anchors and divides, a symbol of belonging and separation twisting into an uneasy knot. This is isolation magnified, no longer just solitude in a vast world, but solitude beyond any possible rescue, beyond any quick return. Yet in that solitude lies a new kind of awakening. Because when Earth no longer serves as a cradle or a safe harbor, the meaning of belonging transforms. Home becomes an idea not tied to geography, but carved into rituals, memories, and communities built in vacuum and soil. To live on Mars is to carry the essence of humanity into a darkness that demands illumination from within, not supplied by the comfort of familiar skies. The notion that the first humans will never come back is not simply a technical limitation. It is the echo of a deeper, more unsettling truth, that the act of settling Mars redefines humanity's relationship to itself. These pioneers are not just explorers, but architects of a new world, and with it, new rules for human survival and continuity. Their journey is a crossing of thresholds not just physical but philosophical. They will embody a first step in a species learning to be everywhere and nowhere at once. This transformation doesn't come without sacrifice. Leaving one planet behind may be the most profound act of faith. Faith that life can endure and evolve outside its original soil. The loss is not only of place but of a story, a shared memory woven into the air, water, and land of Earth. Mars does not simply ask humans to adapt their bodies and technology. It demands they rewrite their narrative identity. What does it mean then to be human when your ancestors' birthplace becomes a memory, and your home is a fragile bubble surrounded by a vast, indifferent universe? This question reverberates through every system built to support life on Mars, and through every heartbeat broken by the distance from Earth. It challenges the very roots of our self-understanding. Are we earthbound creatures, or are we stargazers, wanderers destined to be unmoored? The architecture of Mars's survival is a metaphor for civilization's future limits. Every airlock seal, every recycled molecule, every rationed drop of water is a reminder that survival is a process of constant negotiation with scarcity. The planet offers no bounty and demands exacting maintenance on hope itself, transforming human endeavor into an unending vigil against entropy. And in those endless days and uncertain nights, the settlers will become philosophers without choice. Each decision, whom to trust, how to allocate resources, when to repair or innovate, will be a meditation on risk, resilience, and responsibility magnified to a planetary scale. Their lives will embody the stark truth that intelligence is not a guarantee of survival, but a fragile dialectic between curiosity and caution. Mars is more than a planet. It is a question posed to humanity's future. Can a species evolve beyond its origin story? Can we become multiple yet whole? Can we embrace loss as part of becoming and distance as a new form of intimacy? The first footsteps on Mars may never step backward, but they may also mark the first moments in a new chapter, where the species reimagines home not as a place, but as a continuity of meaning stretched across worlds. The cosmic unease that arises here is not despair, but a recognition of our place. Small, precious, and tenuously sustained in a universe that does not promise permanence. The price of venturing into that silence may be the surrender of the notion of home as a stable refuge. Instead, home becomes an emergent narrative, fragile and fleeting, constructed from shared will. It is a testament to human endurance, not of flesh alone, but of spirit. This is where the journey to Mars and the journey inward converge. Our gaze toward another world illuminates questions about our own world's fragility and our species' potential to transcend it. Are we confined forever to a single cradle? Or are we capable of casting roots among the stars? The answer will define not just the future of humans, but the destiny of life itself. To choose Mars is to choose transformation, a leap into uncertainty without the safety net of return. It is to embrace a fate where every breath is a gift, every sunrise a reluctant triumph, and every day lived a quiet revolt against extinction. The first humans on Mars will write a new kind of story, not a tale of conquest or return, but of fragile becoming across impossible distances and unforgiving realities. And as their footprints press into red dust, as their machines hum in the thin air, humanity's meaning expands, fractures, and persists. Mars is not the end of the story nor the beginning of a simple new chapter. It is a crucible where the old definitions of survival, belonging, and home dissolve and new meanings are forged in dust and silence. In the vastness beyond the blue dot lies not only a frontier of space but a frontier of self-understanding. Mars asks us, what will you carry forward when you can never come back? The question is as old as consciousness itself, yet now it is no longer rhetorical. It is the threshold humanity must cross if it hopes to endure in a universe that demands courage, curiosity, and the willingness to become forever strangers in our own story. And if these are the kinds of questions that pull you deeper into the unknown, subscribe to Beyond the Universe, because here science becomes more than explanation. It becomes an invitation to confront what it means to be alive across vast, unknowable distances and to venture beyond the horizons of certainty into the haunting and magnificent possibility of becoming other than where we started. As the dust settles on that barren landscape beneath alien skies, a profound silence will echo, not just of physical emptiness, but of a civilization at its most vulnerable and most daring moment. Here is humanity, stripped to its essentials, not a conqueror of worlds but a custodian of life in its most precious, precarious form. The red planet offers no amnesty, no second chances. Every breath taken is a fragile plea for continuation against the indifferent vastness. Imagine the shifting perspective in this moment. You are both insignificantly small and inexplicably vast. Insignificant because the cosmos dwarfs you in scale and duration. Vast because your very choice to inhabit this new world signals an intelligence reaching beyond instinct, toward meaning, hope, and defiance. The first humans on Mars embody this paradox, wanderers who carry the weight of generations and architects of a nascent future amid the dust. And yet, the paradox deepens. Mars will never be Earth. Its landscapes bear scars of ancient catastrophes, its atmosphere a whisper, its sun a muted glow. To live there is to live within limits imposed by physics, radiation, uncertainty. The settlers will be pilgrims in a place where every forward step must be measured in margins of error and hope. Their survival will hinge as much on mental resilience as on mechanical endurance. If the first humans never return, it will not be because of failure, but because of a threshold crossed, a transformation where return loses its meaning. The point is not to abandon Earth or forget home. It is to weave a new continuum across time and space, where humanity becomes less tethered to a single planet and more capable of enduring beyond it. This transition is both infinite and intimate, cosmic and deeply personal. That shift touches the core of human destiny. We have long been Earth's children, nurtured by its cycles, shadows, and storms. To become the children of multiple worlds means accepting fragmentation, multiplicity, and risk, but also possibility and renewal. It means that humanity's story will no longer unfold under one sky, but many, a vast constellation of hopes scattered like stars, some close, some impossibly distant. It is in this scattering that the essence of transcendence begins. Mars may be the first doorway, but the vision extends beyond, to oceans seething beneath icy moons, to floating cities on diamond skies, perhaps even to habitats spun from light and gravity itself. Each new home will demand new ways of thinking about community, identity, survival, and love. Yet even with these immense possibilities, the cosmic unease persists, because expansion does not guarantee salvation. The very act of spreading life across worlds may fracture our unity, crystallize old fissures into new abstractions, and disperse the fragile coherence of human culture. The question is whether intelligence can hold together while being pulled apart, whether interconnectedness can survive the growing space between us. But this tension, between unity and separation, between hope and loss, is itself the engine of civilization's evolution. The first Mars settlers will live at its fulcrum, becoming a bridge between old certainties and new unknowns. Their lives will be a poem of resilience, repetition, adaptation, and above all, intention, a living testament that to survive in space is to carry not just technology, but conscience. The real reason the first humans on Mars will never come back is not just physics or engineering. It is that the journey redefines the meaning of home and survival for our species. Returning would mean trying to fold a transformed civilization back into a context that no longer holds it. It would mean closing the door on a necessary new phase of human existence, born of scarcity, distance, and possibility. Mars is both an ending and a beginning. It closes the chapter of humanity as a single-planet creature even as it opens the vast book of multi-world life. To step onto that soil once is to commit to the stark reality that the future is no longer located in one place, one world, or one story. And as you let that idea settle, let its gravity shift the way you think about space, survival, and the fragile thread that connects us to our origins, you begin to realize that the first footprints on Mars are not just marks in the dust. They are the first strokes in humanity's largest, most difficult, and most dazzling artwork, the animation of life beyond home. The vast silence of Mars will be filled, not by echoes of return, but by the steady cadence of a civilization learning to balance on the edge of a new world, poised between cosmic indifference and human wonder. The first humans who arrive there will become, in a sense, the ultimate ambassadors, not just of Earth, but of life itself, fragile and beautiful in the face of infinity. Because here, We journey together into the raw truths beneath exploration, into the spaces where science, philosophy, and the human spirit collide and expand. The tale of Mars is not simply a story of rockets or dust storms, but a meditation on what survival means when home is no longer a single blue sanctuary, but a network of worlds teetering on the brink of meaning and oblivion. The first humans there may never come back, not because they cannot, but because they embody a destiny larger than return, a destiny that transforms loss into presence and absence into possibility. So, look up. The stars are no longer just light years away. They are horizons of becoming, thresholds of transformation. And as we imagine the red horizon of Mars, we glimpse the vast, trembling future of a species, learning to survive not just on Earth, but beyond it, carrying the fragile spark of life into the cosmic night, never quite certain where home begins or ends. And yet, even after all the engineering diagrams, all the orbital mechanics, all the talk of habitats and ascent vehicles and return windows, the deepest reason the first humans on Mars may never come back is not mechanical at all. It is historical. Civilizations do not merely travel, they change in the act of traveling. By the time a permanent presence exists on Mars, Earth will not be the only center of human life anymore. It will still be the origin, yes, but not the sole axis of destiny. The map of our species will have acquired a second gravity. That second gravity will pull in ways we can barely anticipate. Money, labor, governance, law, identity, parenthood, aging, grief, and ambition will all begin to behave differently in a world where distance is no longer metaphorical but operational. A decision made on Earth may arrive on Mars too late to matter. A crisis on Mars may require people on Earth to think in terms of weeks, not headlines. The old rhythm of human institutions will begin to sound wrong, like music played in a lower key by a civilization that has not yet learned the new tempo of space. There is a reason frontier myths always carry a shimmer of cruelty in them. We like to imagine the frontier as freedom, but freedom on Mars will be inseparable from dependence. Dependence on machines, power grids, recycling systems, stored calories, atmospheric integrity, and the discipline of people who cannot afford to make mistakes twice. The first humans there will live in an environment that punishes improvisation, unless improvisation is backed by terrifying competence. They will not be pioneers in the romantic sense. They will be caretakers of the thin line between life and failure. And still, if they stay, something miraculous may happen. Not because Mars becomes gentle, but because human life has always had the strange capacity to become native to the improbable. We made homes in deserts, in tundra, on islands, atop mountains, and in cities that would have seemed impossible to our ancestors. Mars is only the next and most demanding version of that same impulse. The difference is that every previous home was built under a sky that could still breathe with us. Mars will not offer that mercy. That is why the first generation may never truly return. Their children, if they are born there, will inherit a reality where Earth is beloved, but not central in the same way. A Martian child may grow up with Earth as a place of origin in the same emotional category as mythic ancestry, not practical belonging. And once that happens, the word homecoming changes shape. It becomes a visit to a historical source, not a return to one's own world. That is not a small linguistic shift. It is a civilizational redefinition. Now imagine the consequences. A child raised in low gravity may have a body shaped by another world. Their bones, muscles, and circulatory system will be tuned differently than those of an Earth-born human. Their sense of space, motion, and even risk may subtly differ. Over generations, these differences may accumulate. Culture will respond. Architecture will respond. Education will respond. Political systems will respond. What begins as adaptation may become divergence. And divergence, if sustained long enough, becomes a kind of destiny. The unsettling beauty of this is that it reveals how fragile the word humanity really is. We say it as if it names something fixed, but in reality it names a moving target of biology, culture, technology, and shared memory. On Mars, those ingredients will be recombined under severe pressure. The result may still be recognizably human, or it may begin to feel like a distant branch of ourselves, shaped by a harsh world into a different style of consciousness. Not alien, but not untouched by alienness either. This is where the philosophical weight becomes almost unbearable. If the first humans on Mars never come back, we may one day understand that they were not lost. They were early. They crossed ahead of the rest of us into a phase of existence that could not be reversed once it began. Their one-way nature will have been the cost of opening a corridor between worlds. Every later transit, every later settlement, Every later child born beneath artificial skies will owe something to that first irreversible step. And so the story of Mars becomes a story about thresholds, not the kind that separate one room from another, but the kind that separate one era from the next. There is a moment in every civilization when the old world can still be recognized, but the new one has already started to speak in a different grammar. Mars is that moment on a planetary scale. The first arrivals may think they are planting a flag. In truth, they may be planting a future. But what of Earth? Here lies the most painful layer of all. As we build elsewhere, the importance of the home world does not disappear. It deepens. Every off-world settlement will continue to rely on Earth for expertise, raw materials, cultural memory, scientific breakthroughs, and perhaps moral orientation. Earth will remain the great source archive of human experience. Yet the irony is severe. The more successful we become off-world, the less absolute Earth's role becomes. It ceases to be the only cradle and becomes the first chapter. That does not diminish its sanctity. If anything, it heightens it. To know that humans may leave permanently is to understand Earth more intimately than ever before. The oceans, forests, weather systems, and open air begin to look less like background and more like a miracle we spent millennia failing to appreciate. Mars will not make Earth less important. It may make Earth holy in a new and maybe more painful way. Not because we own it, but because we finally understand how rare it is. And this is the great paradox at the heart of the Red Planet. It may teach us to become less attached to a single place by teaching us how irreplaceable places truly are. Home is not just where life begins. It is where life becomes possible in the most intimate, generous way. Mars will never offer that generosity freely. It will require architecture, vigilance, sacrifice, and long-term thinking on a scale our current civilization has only begun to master. In doing so, it may force us to grow up as a species. Growing up in the civilizational sense is never romantic. It is the shedding of comforting lies. It is the realization that survival is not guaranteed by good intentions. It is the understanding that expansion without ethics becomes conquest, and endurance without wisdom becomes repetition of the same mistakes under a different sky. Mars offers us a chance to do something rare, to extend life without reproducing our own blindness. That is why the first humans there will carry more than equipment. They will carry a philosophical burden. They will embody humanity's unresolved question: are we a species that uses intelligence merely to preserve itself, or a species capable of using intelligence to transform itself responsibly? The answer may be written, not in speeches or treaties, but in how those first settlements are built, maintained, governed, and remembered. Because if the settlement becomes a place where only the strongest survive, then we will have exported inequality into the cosmos. If it becomes a place where cooperation, redundancy, humility, and long-range care are valued above spectacle, then Mars may become something radical. The first civilization designed around the knowledge that it lives at the edge of extinction and chooses, every day, not to be ruled by that fear. That possibility is the source of the deepest awe. Not that we go to Mars. Many species could, in theory, send machines. The awe lies in the fact that conscious beings may one day live on a world that did not make them, depend on systems they must constantly renew, and call that place home. That is not just technological audacity. It is the expansion of meaning into a place where meaning must be actively maintained or it will die. So when we say the first humans on Mars will never come back, we are really saying that civilization is entering a state where back no longer contains the future. We are saying that the frontier is no longer a place at the edge of the map, but a condition of being, a life lived in translation between worlds. We are saying that the species may survive by becoming less centralized, less certain, and far more responsible than it has ever been. And perhaps that is the true transcendence hidden inside the fear. Not escape from Earth, but fidelity to life. Not escape from mortality, but a broader architecture for mortality to exist within. Not escape from the universe, but participation in its larger possibilities. Mars may take the first people who arrive, and it may keep them. But in doing so, it may give something back to humanity that is larger than a return trip ever could, the chance to continue. In the end, this unfolding saga is not just about bodies moving across space, but about the unfolding of human meaning itself. The story of those first settlers who may never return is a story about becoming something new, something neither entirely earthbound nor fully alien, but a synthesis forged in the crucible of necessity and hope. Their presence on Mars will be a living testament to the fragile yet tenacious spark that orders our atoms into consciousness and civilization. This is a story of paradox and persistence, of leaving to stay, of choosing loss to gain continuity, of accepting solitude as a path toward connection. The first humans on Mars will teach us that survival is not merely a biological imperative, but a cultural, ethical, and philosophical project, one that demands daily recommitment, collaboration, and imagination. They will remind us that the future is not a place we reach, but a place we build, carefully, patiently, with all the humility our history can teach. Mars will be both mirror and canvas, reflecting our vulnerabilities and inviting us to paint new possibilities beyond the confines of Earth's air and gravity. And so the question shifts from will they come back to what does it mean to carry home within you when home is no longer singular? It is a question that will resonate through generations, shaping not just the trajectory of exploration, but the very content of human identity and aspiration. The first humans on Mars will be not just explorers or settlers, but pioneers of meaning on a planetary scale. Their lives will embody the tension between continuity and change, belonging and estrangement, hope and sacrifice. They will reveal that the true frontier is not only out there in the stars, but in the depths of what it means to be human in a universe that is both beautiful and indifferent. As we imagine their footsteps on red dust, let us remember that in their solitude and courage, we glimpse a story larger than any single journey, a story of life itself extending, adapting, transforming against the backdrop of cosmic vastness. And if that story inspires you, challenges you, or humbles you, then it has already begun to reach beyond the boundaries of space and time, becoming part of our shared human journey forward. Because to go to Mars is not simply to go somewhere else. It is to go somewhere new within ourselves, to embrace the uncertain, to prove our capacity not just to survive but to become, and in doing so, to extend the narrative of life far beyond a single world's horizon. This ongoing journey reminds us that exploration is less about reaching a dot on a map and more about transforming our understanding of who we are and what we might become. Mars is a stage on which humanity's capacity for resilience, creativity, and meaning-making will be tested in unprecedented ways. It is a place that will demand not only technological mastery, but profound emotional and ethical wisdom. As generations live and possibly thrive on Mars, a new culture will emerge, one shaped by the demands of its environment and the shared experience of existing at the edge of known human possibility. Rituals, stories, art, and social bonds will evolve to fit this context, reweaving the fabric of humanity in threads spun from alien dust and human hope. We can expect challenges unlike any faced before, isolation layered with connection, scarcity balanced by ingenuity, and the ever-present tension between individual survival and collective well-being. The settlers will be the first to learn lessons about cooperation and stewardship, written at the scale of planets rather than neighborhoods or nations. In this light, the permanence of their stay gains new meaning. Never returning will not be a defeat, but a transformation. An acceptance that progress sometimes unfolds not in grand returns, but in quiet continuities. Their lives will be the pulse of a new chapter, written not with triumphant conquests, but with steady care and enduring commitment. The legacy of these first humans on Mars will be more than scientific data or technological breakthroughs. It will be the birth of a new form of human experience, a life lived consciously as part of a fragile, interplanetary ecosystem that demands mindfulness, respect, and imagination on a scale never before required. Looking forward, one can envision a future where Mars is just the first in a series of hubs that extend humanity's reach. Moons, asteroids, orbital habitats, each adding complexity and richness to the evolving story of our species. Each will carry forward the lessons learned on Mars and expand the boundaries of what it means to be human. Yet the heart of that story will always be those initial steps, taken knowing there is no guaranteed way back, only the promise of forging a new path forward. It is a story imbued with the bittersweet recognition that creation requires sacrifice, that growth demands leaving something behind, and that enduring meaning often arises from acts of courage rooted in uncertainty. As the dust of Mars settles beneath boots that will never touch Earth again, those first settlers will leave behind more than footprints. They will leave a legacy of transformation, resilience, and hope that reaches across space and time, reminding us all that home is not a place but a condition we create together. In this way, Mars will serve not only as a physical destination but as a symbol, the symbol of a species reaching beyond the known, learning to bear the weight of existence in the vast and silent cosmos, and choosing to live meaningfully in the face of profound change. The future of humanity, then, may well hinge on the choices made by those who first walked the red planet's surface. choices that will resonate far beyond Mars, shaping not only our relationship to space, but to ourselves, to one another, and to the fragile world we all call home. And so we arrive at the closing truth. The first humans on Mars may never come back, because the act of going there changes what coming back even means. They will not simply be astronauts far from home. They will be the founders of a new branch of human history, living proof that life can cross the hardest boundaries and still remain life. Their departure will feel, to those on Earth, like an ending, but to the future it will be a beginning so large that we will only slowly learn how to name it. The red dust, the silent horizon, the thin sky above them, all of it will become the backdrop for humanity's next great transformation, from a species that visits worlds to a species that belongs to more than one. That is the real closure of this story, and also its opening. Mars is not just a destination, it is a threshold. Once crossed, it cannot be uncrossed in the same way. The people who step onto that soil will carry Earth forever in their memory, but they will also carry the responsibility of everything that comes after. They will be the first to prove that home can be expanded without being erased. And perhaps that is the most hopeful ending of all. Not that we escape our origin, but that we grow beyond its limits while still honoring it. Not that we abandon Earth, but that we understand it more deeply because we had the courage to leave. Not that we return unchanged, but that we return only in story, in memory, and signal, while our living future continues onward, among the stars. So let the final image be this: a small figure on a vast red plain, standing beneath a pale sky, looking back not toward a road home, but toward the beginning of a civilization still being born. Behind them lies Earth, distant and blue. Ahead lies everything else. And in that silence between worlds, humanity takes its next breath. This is the end of the first chapter of a larger human saga, and the beginning of our life among the stars.